All right, Lions fans, we're back with another one. Let's talk about the alleged leading candidate for the coaching job for the Detroit Lions, and Dan Campbell. Um, of course, you could go with the background that he's a ex-player of the Lions, and he has some, as a player personnel, he has ties here, and he had a stint with head coaching, tight end per se, and different positions that he may have coached in, and from uh, New Orleans to Miami and different other things. Even though he was the interim head coach with Miami, and and how that works out. But I wanted to say this about him: if they choose to hire him, what I saw in Patricia is what I see in him, and I got a lot of flack and a lot of on my stance for Patricia, and Dan Campbell is actually the next step evolution of Matt Patricia. If Matt Patricia were to was if Matt Patricia took the next step of himself, what you would see come from Dan Campbell would be that image of that. When I see Dan Campbell, I see two guys. I see Bill Parcells and I see Jimmy Johnson. That's the same thing that I saw in Patricia. Patricia just didn't want to take the next step of himself as a person. That line is the things that you don't have to do, you do. That makes the difference of the outcome in most cases. The detail, the next step, if you care about something or if you don't. So, but anyway, I think Dan Campbell is more well-rounded, more, I will say, humbled in that way, in that regard, that he could take the next stage or the next turn the next page of his book, and he could write a new chapter. Versus Patricia, I think he was quite content with where he was of his book, and there was nothing more for him to write. He probably was looking for a comfortable situation versus evolution. And I think Dan Campbell is a guy who was up for the challenge as the head coach with very little experience. Sometimes experience could be an asset and it could be a liability. I heard a gentleman say to me one time when I was working this particular job and as a construction worker, and I didn't know as much as he did, in from my thinking at the time, and he made this point. He said, I've been doing this for 20 something years, so I pretty much know everything. And so he was saying it with arrogance, as though he has basically he invented the wheel, reinvented the wheel, and actually don't have no more room to understand about the wheel or to develop or to evolve further into the wheel. So he asked me a question about something, and like, what was my take about him and of his experience? And I go on to say, 20 something years of experience doesn't mean anything. It just means that you've been doing something for 20 something years. The testament of if it's successful or not is in the people, not in the person who so-called have the experience. If I want to see if your craft is successful, I'll look at the expressions of the people that you worked for or worked with. I'll look at them. They'll tell me the story without even saying a word. And that's why I think where Patricia dropped the ball at, he was telling a story without walking it out. And that's a tough beat to follow. So anyway, going back to Dan Campbell, I really don't care about too much of candidates having ties to the Lions. I want the Lions to actually any personnel that they bring in here. My personal preference is for them to have like this clean slate, if you will. Like they don't have to be entitled or look in the rearview mirror of their stint here because people okay how the media does it here or the fans do it here. Your past is who you're going to be. There's very little wiggle room for you to evolve. So that's the SOL mantra that any person that have had success anywhere else, they become sucked into this dark hole here. You will be your past. If you were successful somewhere else, you will be your past here. You will be successful here. Or if you was a failure somewhere else, you'll be a failure here. They deem you in this hole with very little wiggle room for you to evolve. So I'm going to give this guy, if he's okay, the next, I don't know how the protocol goes because I don't know if he's still a part of the Saints, coaching staff. I don't know if he's still part of that and he's allowed to accept the job or not. From my understanding, I thought that if once your team is eliminated from playoffs or from the actual season, that you can go ahead and go from there. But apparently they interviewed him, so I guess that was enough. So I guess you could do that in the midst of a season. So, but anyway, I guess if you get permission to do so, you can. Well, so with I'm going to say this: he is actually tailor made to finish what Bob Quinn and Patricia. Well, let me just say it this way: he is tailor made to finish what Patricia started. If people thought Patricia was rough around the edges, this guy's going to be rough around the edges too, but a little bit more controlled. So what he's going to give off he's going to send off the same point of emphasis that Patricia's going to send off, but I believe he's going to be more controlled. Like I said, the next step evolution that I wanted Patricia to take, he is that versus him taking it. Now he's going to take, in my opinion, will take the next step of his evolution, which would be I want to look at three guys. This is interesting. Sean Payton, Jimmy Johnson, Bill Parcells. For as a Lions organization, you can act for if he working the seams of them. If he takes this maybe a fraction to a 2/3 of a fraction of any one of those or all three of those versus just being up under one. Patricia was up under one guy and he absorbed a lot. Knowledge is one thing, but to see the fruits of that knowledge where everybody else could tell the story of what you know by their accomplishment, then you are actually pretty good past the facts of just having it, knowledge, or so-called being the wise man of the room. If he takes a fraction of Parcells and Sean Payton and Jimmy Johnson, if you take a fraction of those three and bring that here, he's exactly what the Lions need. The way Bob Quinn and Patricia structured this team is tailor-made for him. And if Brad Holmes is, as the GM, if he is who I assumed that he was when he was with the Rams, they will finish out the deal. What Bob Quinn and and Patricia started, they would complete it. This team is not in the mode for a rebuild, but actually there's some fine tuning. First thing first, they have to address the Stafford situation. What I mean by that is your offense can't really go any further, which supposedly is the strength. It can't go any further till they figure out what they're going to do with Stafford. In my personal opinion, what I personally would do, of course, this is in most cases this is considered unwise. I'm trading Matt Stafford, and even though there's a 19 million attached for the cap hit of a trade package, let's say there if out of the win, some team offered me a first and a second for him, a first this year, a second next year. I'm taking it. Or a first this year and a fourth next year. I'm taking it. I'll go as low as a fourth, and of course you're talking about high as a first. I'll take it, and I'll take on the $19 million cap hit, and I will roll with David Blau. The reason why I will roll with David Blau because I will turn him into Tom Brady. Somebody said, "Well, you can't do that. I mean, Tom Brady is Tom Brady." Well, Tom Brady is Tom Brady, and Joe Montana is Joe Montana. So those are arguably, in my opinion, my two favorite quarterbacks. But what made them so successful in comparison to any other quarterback? The system was catered around their strengths, and the team protected their weaknesses. So it became more of a team oriented. Their strength was actually they're not just a competitor. Their competitor is high, or competitiveness is high, or their competitive nature is high. Yet they're able to take what they saw on the board and put it on the field. They may not have the best or have the strongest arm, the most talented arm that can make all the throws and so forth, but yet still they can make the right throw at the right time. They can have the composure to make the right play at the right time. They can have the foresight to convince a defensive coordinator to do something that they don't want to do. All they need is the personnel to do what they need to do. So there is no Joe Montana without a John Elway. You can say a Dwight Clark. Not John Elway, forgive me. Without a Jerry Rice, without a John Taylor, without a Brent Jones, or without even a Dwight Clark and Frank, I believe his name was Freddie Solomon. So there is none of that. You don't get a Joe Montana without all that. And the reason why, like Tom Brady was so successful, it wasn't because they had a dominant run game. It's not because they had dominant receivers. You had guys that was willing to do their job to the at 100%, not anything less. From the Wes Welkers to the I believe Amendola was there. And you had these, and I believe Amendola was actually a safety, if I'm not mistaken, got converted over to a receiver. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong. I believe he played a safety with the Rams and got converted over to a receiver. But anyway, that's going somewhere entirely different. But my first thing first is I'm addressing the Stafford situation. I'm getting rid of Stafford to let him go. I mean, to move on. I saw a stat, and I believe it was like it was a record actually, 44-90. You gotta get rid of that. Can you win with Stafford? Yeah, you can. But Stafford wouldn't be Stafford. The way Stafford plays, he's good for a team like Denver. He's good for a team like Dallas. He's good for a team that actually protects their investment. And I don't know if Brad Holmes or Dan Campbell would do it as sort, but they never really protected Stafford in a way to groom him. And grooming him doesn't necessarily mean that you have to sit up under somebody to learn how to do the craft. Grooming him was actually just being protection. Though as an organization, as a head coach and so forth, as the atmosphere that you're setting, you basically putting your players in the best situation for them to be successful. Particularly if your face of your franchise is Matthew Stafford, then you're gonna do your due diligence and everything you possibly can to protect him to be your face of your franchise. So you in other words, you're gonna lessen the load of him versus increasing the strength of him. How can I say? What I mean by that, some people say, well, no, you're supposed to play to the player's strength. I get that. You play to the player's strength at certain moments when it's time. But you don't do it because that's what they're good at. What I mean by that is because you can abuse the talent. It's like overloading overloading a player, okay, because he's so good at what he does. And you don't hold nobody, it's like you don't hold nobody else accountable to complement what he does to lessen the load so he can be even greater of his greatness. And I believe the Lions done that. Like when they had Sue, I don't think they really gave him compliments other than who was the gentleman that he worked? It wasn't Wilkerson? Was it Williams, Corey Williams? Whoever was playing next to Sue actually made Sue a lot better. I'm talking with the Lions. As dominant as Sue was, the guy, I want to say it was Corey Williams. The guy who was playing next to Sue when Sue got drafted actually made him better, and that's a testament between the guy next to him, D tackle, as well as Vanden Bosch. They actually made Sue better. As great as Sue was, they made him better. They made him even greater than what he was. Sue was dominant with the Lions because he was allowed to be dominant. You put something next to Sue, like an Aaron Donald, or, with Aaron Donald, is the reverse effect. What Corey Williams or whatever and Vanden Bosch did for Sue is what Sue did for Aaron Donald. And what I'm saying, what I was going with the point about with Sue, if you don't get those two complement players to bring the best out of Sue, as great as he is, it will get stifled because he'd get burnt out because it's overload. He'd start to see his talent in comparison to what the rest of his players or his teammates is producing, and it would become more of a selfish act, more so than a team act. So that's why I believe where the Lions have failed with Matthew Stafford. They exploited his strengths, and as far as like being able to really having a strong arm. So third and two, instead of running the ball or developing the ability to run the ball on 3rd and 2 to get 2 yards, you're passing the ball for like 13 years. Like 3rd and 2, Stafford was in a throwing situation more times than he was in a running situation. And the narrative is they couldn't run the ball. Well, that's based upon establishment. Now that could be personnel too. You get from the O-line and you get all that, but at the same time, it still goes back to protecting your asset. If he's your guy, then you protect him. So it's like a tale of two stories. It's like on one hand, it's like he's their guy, and the other hand, it's like he's not their guy because of how they treat him. So it's almost like the coach is like, well, I wanted to be a head coach, and it's my only shot to be a head coach is to come with the Lions. But to be the head coach of the Lions, I got to keep him as my quarterback. So I have to play to his alleged strengths, which is, you want to say competitiveness, but you want to say basically that he has a strong arm. He's not an accurate quarterback. He doesn't throw in stride. In other words, he doesn't hit the receiver in stride in most cases. So he's not an accurate quarterback. He's a guy that's pretty much rushed in his head, erratic. He would be an excellent closer in baseball, but as a seven inning type pitcher, nah. Or he's like a utility guy. He's whatever you need him to be. But at the same time, this team needed a face, needed a leader. And I believe that the fans deemed him as his leader because he was like the number one overall pick. And even I expected him to be this Ray Lewis type leader, not Ray Lewis play on the field, but his leadership. Tom Brady-ish. I expect him to be more like Tom Brady-ish. I believe Matthew Stafford is far more talented than Tom Brady. But I believe that Tom Brady was just smarter. He used his head more so than he did anything else because he didn't have anything else. But that could be just the tutelage of all the wealth of knowledge and the maturity of his surroundings and Bill Belichick. But anyway, first thing first, you handle the situation with Stafford. I'm letting him go. I'm trading him because I need assets. And he is the best asset that I have that's tradable. Even though it's not really tradable, because you're talking about a 33-year-old, you're talking about a guy who have multiple injuries, and who has a nice little price tag on his contract. But it depends on where you're sending them. It depends on where you're sending them. If you're sending them to a team they believe that they are a quarterback away from getting over the top, such as like the Bears was when they got Jay Cutler from Denver. They believed they was a quarterback away, so they was willing to pay a price for it. So even if that's the case, you do it. So if you got a team like Denver, it depends on how their defense is or how they feel about their defense. You getting a Von Miller back, or if that's how that works out, and you get other players that works out, and you still got to address the draft. So giving up a first and a first this year, or even a second, I will go with the third this year and a first next year. No, a second this year and a first next year. If you could do it that way, or if you were to do it this way, give me a first this year, give me a fourth for Stafford. So, dress Stafford. I'm not re-signing Kenny Galladay. I'm not re-signing Amendola unless I can get it for a cheap price. But I don't believe I can. I believe I can move on from him. I don't know what they're going to do with their receiving core. It depends on who their quarterback is. If I'm going in my opinion, I will make David Blau my quarterback. And my goal for the team for the first year is to be 8-8. That's a tough sell for a losing franchise. To the fans. I will make my goal 8-8. What I mean by that is the next year, if they get the capital for next year, the draft capital for next year, I think you have a better class of quarterbacks coming out next year, as well as being desperate to get one because of the fear of Stafford's age and you need to groom him. What I say about that, a person might say, like, well, then why would you go with David Blau? Because David Blau will be exactly what I would need it for a Chase Daniels to be up under Stafford last year. 1 year deal, a case of emergency guy. He's not technically the future unless he plays himself into the future. If he turns out to be like a Tom Brady-ish, a diamond among the rough, in other words, he just evolves in such a way that, okay, you keep him, and you can still go draft a quarterback if you want to, but at least he'll give you options. But I go with David Blau because he's what I would want a rookie quarterback to be. A mature, inexperienced guy. He's been up under Stafford. He knows if they keep Bevel, whatever the case may be, or he's familiar with the outlook of this team. Even if it's going in a new direction with the general manager, head coach, and so forth, and maybe possibly offensive coordinator, he's still familiar with the atmosphere of the personnel that he has, and it's less of a development with him. The only compliment I would say that you would give him, as well as I will give any quarterback up under a new system, or any quarterback that I will give as a rookie quarterback, is a run game. Lessen the load. Going back to playing to their strengths. Lessen the load to make them actually greater. And I believe you have the counterparts here to be established that. With that, if you got a 7th overall pick, I'm not going towards a quarterback just to have a quarterback, because I'm saying we need a quarterback. All right, this draft is not really, it's not a bang for the buck for me. It's not the guy. There's not at least 5 guys that stand out in this draft that's like hit you in the face. So this is definitely a draft that if you can trade back, or you trade in the pick for actually a veteran player. Like, okay, of course you're talking about a dream scenario for myself. Yeah, if you got that 7 overall pick and you talk to a team that don't have any first round picks, right? So like a team like Jacksonville, because I believe they gave all their no, not Jacksonville actually have first round picks. I believe it's the Rams that don't have first round picks. No, it's Jacksonville. Wait. Who traded to who? Jacksonville had Ramsey. The Rams don't have any first round picks. So I don't even know if they have assets to even to trade for a first round pick. But if I'm the Lions and if I'm the general manager, if I'm allowed, I'm aggressive. I'm going to be aggressive. And I would trade that 7th overall pick to either, if I can go down, I'll go down. A trade back, that is. If I can trade back, I'll trade back. If not, I'm willing to trade that pick for a veteran player at a very skilled position player. Like, this is not a talented player. He's like a game changer, talented player. Let's say, for example, I need a left guard to make this defensive line. I'm not defensive line. This offensive line stout, to make it dominant. I will look at what I have to work with. Okay, I'm going to go into I believe the head coach could probably have done a little bit enough evaluation on the team to see what he has to work with. You have a left tackle, you have a center, you have arguably a right guard and Jonah Jackson. And I'm going to lean towards, even if you go with the combination of 3, one of the 3 is going to take this right tackle spot. Crosby, Matt Nelson, or Halapaludi Vitae. One of the 3 can actually be a good right tackle, based upon what the right side of Ragnow does. The right side of Ragnow goes over to Jonah, and the right side of Jonah goes over to the guard. So they work as a team, as a complementary team. So I would take the 7th overall pick, and since there's no key defensive players coming out of this draft, at least I don't see, that's like immediately out the gate, like how Sue was when I kind of knew, or anybody was looking, you could kind of see that he was just this power, raw power, unteachable type power that, in comparison to a talented player such as a Gerald McCoy, you could see the raw power, exactly what this team needed. They needed an instant guy. They don't need a guy who, such as what I'm projecting for David Blau to be. They don't need a guy that you could let evolve and all that good stuff and develop into that good player. You need somebody to hit the ground running power out the gate, whatever. And I guess it's why people, a lot of a lot of fans are really down on the Jeff Okudah pick. And see, I'm actually have the reverse effect for the Jeff Okudah pick. I didn't need him to come out and to be dominant from the start. I didn't need that because his team wasn't ready to be dominant. I didn't need that. I needed him to be a complementary piece and evolve into dominance because I was looking for a team versus I didn't see any player in that draft that was coming out that was going to hit the ground running, just dominant. So I expected him to be the same I would have expected Isaiah Simmons to be. Just a complimentary piece. So David Blau is my quarterback. Chase Daniels is my backup. And my goal is 8-8. Because I'm trying to develop camaraderie. I'm trying to develop a chemistry with the team. I don't even know what I have. I don't even have an identity. I need one group to be dominant, and we can build off of that. There's not one group on this team that's finished to be dominant. And I believe the closest that they have in that direction is the offensive line. That's why I would take that 7th overall pick. If I could trade back, I trade back. Somebody may say, well, they got Steinberg. Well, I say I need dominance. So let's say, for example, hypothetically, this is when I talk about figures of money situation. We just throwing out a scenario. Let's say like if Matt Nelson I believe he's the guard for Indianapolis. And we could say he's dominant. He's a dominant guard. He's still young. I believe he's still young. And he's an actual complement to Decker and Ragnow, right? He will make he will lessen their job. And actually, they will actually put emphasis on to make him even greater than what he's already showed. For the 7 overall pick, I'd trade him for that if that was available. It just said like he's nowhere near hit his prime yet, but he's still young enough. So like he's 26 years of less. You know, I'm talking about like maybe like 24 years or less or something like that. I don't know how old he is. I don't know. I'm just throwing out a scenario type. Not saying particularly him per se, but a left guard that a player that's already, I don't have to teach how to give 100% of his craft. That's who I'm looking for. I'm looking for guys like that. So even if that's as a linebacker, if that's on a defensive line, that's in the secondary, that's in the O-line, with that 7th overall pick, I will use that for that. I won't get a quarterback or a player just because they're it. I will take that 7th overall pick, and if I found let's say for example, the Rasheed Wallace deal, for the Pistons, it's evident based upon what they accomplished that he was the right piece for that starting 4. Right? He was a right piece for it. He was everything that starting 4 needed. He was a compliment to Ben, as well as he was a compliment to Tayshaun. He was a compliment to Chauncey and Rip when they was doing to take off the scoring load. So he was a compliment to the defense, the offense. He was a compliment to arguably their best player on defense, as well as arguably their best player on offense. His compliment to their leader to help them out emotionally, so that the leader wouldn't have to be so leaderish and be so, demanding. He was just a perfect piece. And, he was, of course, a defensive, offensive guy. He was just well-rounded. He could shoot inside, outside. He was a perfect piece. So that's what I'm looking for. And I will make that trade with the 7th overall, with the 7th pick. If I could trade back, I trade back and get multiple picks. yeah, I do it. But if I can't, if I see a guy like that's young enough that can grow with the, that's young enough to groom with what I got going with my offensive line, I'm taking it. So those are the first couple moves that I would do if I was taking over with the Lions. I'm going with David Blau as my quarterback. I'm letting go of Stafford, even if I got to take the $19 million cap hit. I'm letting it go because as good as a quarterback is, as much of a quarterback of Matthew Stafford, I don't have to groom and everything else. He is a guy. He's like a Herschel Walker guy. And what I mean by that, when the Dallas Cowboys have very limited assets to work with, Jimmy Johnson rolled the dice with his best player. And of course, you know, he got a ransom, King's ransom back. Of course, a player may say, like, well, if you can get a King ransom, you take it. Well, then, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Now, they would say, like, well, I'm sure the Dallas Cowboys fans were saying, like, what are you doing by getting rid of Herschel Walker? He's your best player. I think outside of that, all you had was Troy Aikman or Michael Irvin. I forgot who was there first. I believe it was Aikman. And then Jim Johnson ended up getting Michael Irvin. And with that draft from of the Herschel Walker deal, he was able to get a whole bunch of players. So I would take Stafford situation as like the Herschel Walker deal. Even if I'm not getting top value, I'm looking to unload him for assets. Even if it's a player with draft capital, I'm taking it. Why? Because he gives me the best. He gives me the most of my return. Now, of course, it's a gamble because he's a proven veteran that you don't have to teach anything, pretty much anything. But however, he can give me what I need. He can give me the extra piece to move forward, particularly if I have a general manager and his strength is finding diamonds. He has a record of drafting players or being part of a team that's drafting players, or he scouted players, let's say it that way. He scouted players that actually turned out to be on a team, not just good players or not just average players, but they're good players. They're either Pro Bowlers or they have a long tenure on the team, an impact on the team. Either they're starters or they're, you know, or this, whatever, they're elite, whatever. You know, his record proves itself or tells itself. So I'm giving him the best. I'm going to use him as his strengths. If his strengths as a general manager is to find talent, well, now I'm going to give him enough pieces to find as much talented as he can. Because his team is not in a rebuild. It just need to be fine tuned. In most cases, fine tuned sometimes is addition with subtraction. So I'm going to need more assets. Matthew Stafford is my Herschel Walker deal that I'm looking for. Even if I got to take the $19 million cap hit, I would, as well as he is. He have all the history, all the records, everything. He's devoted. He's a good guy, all that. He is my Herschel Walker deal. I don't know if they will be allowed to do it, even though they may, the upper management, I mean, the owner may say that they have the rights to do it, but I believe they would have. I believe they're going to hire the people that want to keep Stafford, and not just keep Stafford because they believe that he is. Excuse me. They believe that he is the best for his team going forward. But I believe if they wanted the job as a head coach, because they wanted a job as a head coach, that was part of the package deal. So Stafford and his $19 million is gone. I'm trading that if I can for a Herschel Walker deal. So, you know, even if it's like I'm getting a player that's going to help me right then and there. If I could package it, if I could package Stafford, the 7th overall, for this very particular player that make one position elite. That's where I need my general manager to be able to see. Like when they looked at Rasheed Wallace, of course, when Rasheed Wallace was on the market from Atlanta, I don't know if he was on the market, But when he was let go from Portland, and of course he spent like one game with Atlanta, and then he ended up going to Detroit. But when the trade was, when he was, from what I was hearing about the Pistons, they was looking to the Rasheed Wallace deal even before the start when Larry Brown got there, because Larry Brown was like, "That's the guy I need." That's what I'm saying in Dan Campbell. That's what I would need in Dan Campbell. I would need him to see what he has in his personnel, so he could be able to tell the coach, "This is what I need to complement what we have going." So I will need the general manager. Like if I'm doing an interview as a general manager, I'm interviewing the coach and I'm saying, okay, what do you see with this personnel? Never mind, don't tell me what you did somewhere else. What you see in this personnel? All right. And I'm not going to ask them very specific questions so they can give me an answer off of it. I'm asking what you see in this personnel. And as a general manager, I'm looking for you to say one thing. Which group holds like the greatest strength from being good to great? That's what I'm looking for. Which one are you going to tell me? Because I can imagine that a coach that's interviewing maybe can really accessorize this team in its totality of saying that its strengths and weaknesses. But I can, from what I observed as a as a head coach, whatever, or from a distant, you know, a guy that's a candidate for the job, I absorbed that your offensive line is pretty much ready to go as an elite offensive line. They just need a tweaking. Okay. What do you see? What player do you know? If we can get a guy like this here, I would need Dan Campbell to know that guy based upon what he saw from being, an observer as a as an assistant or a coordinator up under the Saints and so forth, and what he saw. Give me this guy for this position group. I need you to sell me on what I already have, not what we can do down the road. Because if you can actually turn water into wine, so to speak, like if you can actually see what we have here, we could be on the same page as a general manager, head coach. And I, as a general manager, I can get you everything that you need for you to be successful. With that being said, Lions fans, salute.